Today on Tackle You, we are going to enter the world SIP trunks.
Okay.
It might sound a little technical at first, but trust me, it's way more interesting than it sounds. It's really about how we communicate and how it's changing.
Yeah, it really is a fascinating story. It's easy to get bogged down in the technical stuff, but what it comes down to is SIP trunking is solving a real world problem, the limitations of traditional phone systems
Yeah, and the cost.
and the cost.
Yeah, I mean, I remember, dealing with those old phone systems and it was such a pain. I mean, just to like add new lines or make international calls. So how do SIP trunks actually fix that?
Well, think about it like if you were stuck with a really slow postal service and then suddenly somebody introduced high-speed internet for sending messages. That's kind of what SIP trunks do for business communication.
So instead of those old phone lines, SIP trunks use the internet to transmit calls and video and data.
Exactly. It's like having one super highway for all your communication. And that's where the trunk part comes in. It's like a bundle of virtual phone lines all running over the internet.
So it's not just about making calls then.
No,
You mentioned video and data too.
it's way more than just calls.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
Think about it. Those old phone systems could only handle voice, but SIP is built for the modern world. We're talking video conferencing, instant messaging, even file sharing, all riding on that same SIP trunk.
That sounds super versatile, but before we get into everything SIP trunks can do, can we take a step back for a second and break down how it actually works? I think our listeners would love a little SIP101.com check.
Absolutely. So it all starts with a protocol called SIP, which stands for Session Initiation Protocol. It's like a set of rules that devices use to talk to each other over the internet.
Okay, rules of the road for internet communication.
Exactly.
I get it, but what does that look like in practice? Like if I make a SIP call, what's actually happening?
It's kind of like sending a digital letter. First, you need an address, which in this case is your SIP address. It's like your phone number, but in the SIP world.
Okay, so I have my SIP address, like my digital phone number. What happens next?
Then you need the content of your message, which could be your voice or video or even just text data. And then you need a way to deliver it. And that's where the internet comes in.
So the internet is like our digital postal service carrying our SIP messages all over the world.
Exactly. And just like with a letter, a SIP call involves a few steps. First, there's the invite. Your device sends a signal to the person you're calling, basically saying, hey, I want to chat.
So it's like sending an invitation to a virtual party.
Exactly. And then there's the negotiation phase where your device and the other person's device figure out the best way to connect and share data. They're basically agreeing on the language they'll be speaking, so to speak.
So they're ironing out all the technical details behind the scenes.
Right. And then once that's done, you hear the ringing sound, just like with a regular phone call. And once the call is answered, the actual data transfer begins and you can start talking or sharing video or whatever you're doing.
And finally, when you're done with the call, there's the termination stage where the connection is closed.
Exactly. It's like hanging up the phone, but in the digital world. And the beauty of it is this whole process happens so super fast, usually within a fraction of a second.
Wow. It's like a perfectly like choreographed digital dance. Yeah, all happening behind the scenes to connect us in real time. Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
And this whole process from the invite to the termination is managed by a device called a PBX or Private Branch Exchange.
PBX, I heard about them, but what exactly is a PBX?
Think of it like the brain of your phone system. It handles all the call routing features like voicemail, email, and even connects to the outside world through those SIP trunks we've been talking about.
So it's like a central hub that orchestrates all the communication within a business. Yeah, but I'm guessing there are different ways to set up a PBX, right? Like, what about those hosted VoIP solutions I've heard about?
That's a great question, and that brings us to an important distinction. There are two main ways to use SIP trunks. You can either have an on-premise PBX, which is like owning a car, or you can opt for a hosted by IP solution, which is more like taking a taxi.
Okay, I like this analogy. So, owning a car means I have more control. I can customize things to my liking, while taking a taxi is more convenient, but I have less control over the route or the type of car I get.
You got it. With an on-premise PBX, you have your own physical hardware located at your business, and you have complete control over its configuration and maintenance. It's like having your own mechanic on hand to fine-tune your car.
So, for businesses that really need a tailored solution and have the resources to manage it, an on premise PBX with SIP trunks would be a good option.
Exactly. But for businesses that want a simpler approach, more hands-off, hosted VoIP is a great alternative. With hosted VoIP, the PBX is located in the cloud and managed by a provider, so you don't have to worry about the technical details. That's like calling a taxi and letting the driver handle the navigation.
That sounds pretty convenient, but I imagine there are trade offs, like maybe less control over features or customization options.
That's a good point. With hosted VoIP, you're relying on the provider's platform and services, so you might have limited options for customization compared to an on-premise setup. It's like taking a taxi. You're not going to be able to choose the exact model or color of the car.
So there's a trade off between control and convenience, just like owning a car versus taking a taxi.
Exactly. And the best option for a particular business really depends on its specific needs, budget, and technical expertise.
So whether you choose the own a car approach with an on-premise PBX or the take a taxi route with hosted VoIP, the underlying technology connecting everything is still SIP trunking. Yeah, that's pretty cool.
And it is. And now that we've kind of laid the groundwork, I think it's time to talk about what are the benefits? Why are businesses so excited about SIP trunking? What are the benefits that are driving this communication revolution?
Okay, let's get into those benefits. I'm especially curious about those cost savings you mentioned earlier. Those old phone lines were not cheap.
Oh, absolutely. Cost savings are one of the biggest draws of SIP trunking. And it's not just about ditching those expensive traditional phone lines.
All right, tell me more. What else makes SIP trunking so cost effective?
Well, with SIP trunking, you only pay for the bandwidth you actually use. So if you're not making a lot of calls, you're not racking up huge bills. Plus, international calls become way cheaper because you're using the internet instead of those pricey international phone lines.
Okay, so that's a huge win for businesses with global operations or those who frequently make international calls. But cost savings is just one piece of the puzzle, right? You mentioned something about scalability earlier, and I'm curious to learn more about that.
Right. Scalability is another major advantage of SIP trunking. Remember those headaches of adding new phone lines with traditional systems? With SIP trunks, it's as simple as adding virtual lines to your account. No more dealing with physical wiring or waiting for technicians.
So it's like having an elastic phone system that can expand or contract based on your needs.
Exactly.
That's incredibly flexible.
And this flexibility is a game changer for businesses that are growing rapidly or experiencing seasonal fluctuations in their communication needs. You can easily scale up or down without any major disruptions or infrastructure changes.
So I'm starting to see why so many businesses are making the switch to SIP trunking. It's like upgrading from a horse and buggy to a high-speed train.
That's a great analogy. And it's not just about speed and efficiency. SIP trunking also offers significant benefits in terms of business continuity.
Business continuity? I'm intrigued. Tell me more about that.
Imagine there's a power outage or a problem with your internet connection at your main office. With a traditional phone system, your communication would be completely down. But with SIP trunking, you can easily reroute calls to other locations or devices, ensuring that you stay connected no matter what.
Wow, that's a game changer for businesses that rely heavily on communication. It's like having a built-in insurance policy for your phone system.
Exactly. And this resilience is especially crucial in today's world where disruptions can happen at any time. With SIP trunking, you can have peace of mind knowing that your communication will stay up and running even in the face of unexpected challenges.
Okay, so we've got cost savings, scalability, and business continuity. It sounds like SIP trunking is the superhero of business communication. But before anyone rushes off to get SIP trunks, are there any things they should keep in mind? Any potential drawbacks or things to watch out for?
That's a great question. It's important to be aware of the potential downsides as well. One of the biggest things to consider is your internet connection. So,
That makes sense. SIP trunking relies entirely on the internet. So a poor connection could really impact call quality.
exactly. So, before making the switch, it's crucial to make sure that you have a reliable internet connection with enough bandwidth to handle your voice and data traffic. No one wants to deal with choppy calls or dropped connections.
Right. A bad internet connection can really put a damper on things, no matter how great your SIP trunk setup is. So, reliable internet is a must. Have anything else to keep in mind?
Another important factor is choosing a reputable SIP trunk provider. Not all providers are created equal, and you want to make sure you're partnering with a company that has a proven track record of reliability, quality service, and excellent customer support.
So, just like with any service, it's important to do your research
Yes.
and choose a provider that you can trust. But how can someone actually evaluate the reliability of a SIP trunk provider? Are there any red flags to watch out for?
That's a great point. One thing to look for is their network infrastructure and uptime guarantees. Reputable providers will have multiple data centers, diverse POPs, and redundant systems in place to ensure maximum uptime and minimize the risk of outages.
Okay, so multiple data centers in redundancy are good signs. What about customer support? Is there a way to gauge the quality of support before you sign up with a provider?
Absolutely. Look for providers that offer 24/7 support and have a good reputation for responsiveness and helpfulness. You can often find reviews and testimonials from other customers online, which can give you a sense of their support quality.
So, reliable internet, a reputable provider, and solid customer support are all key ingredients for successful SIP trunking experience. It's like building a house. You need a strong foundation and quality materials to ensure that everything stands firm.
Exactly. And once you have those key elements in place, you can start to unlock the full potential of SIP trunking and transform the way your business communicates.
And we've been talking a lot about the benefits for businesses, but I'm curious, does SIP trunking have any relevance for individuals, or is it purely a business technology?
That's a great question, and the answer might surprise you. While SIP trunking is often associated with businesses, the underlying technology is actually powering a lot of the communication services we use every day as individuals.
Oh, really? Tell me more.
Think about all the ways we communicate today: video calls with family and friends, online gaming, even telemedicine. All of these rely on real-time communication protocols, and SIP is a major player in that space.
So, SIP is quietly working behind the scenes, empowering so much of our digital lives.
It really is. And as the world moves further towards internet-based communication, understanding how technologies like SIP work becomes even more important.
All right, in part one of our discussion into SIP trunking, we've talked about the basics of how SIP works, the key differences between on-premise and hosted solutions, and the amazing benefits that this technology offers to businesses.
We've also touched upon the importance of having a reliable internet connection, choosing a reputable provider, and ensuring you have solid customer support. These are the cornerstones of a successful SIP implementation.
We'll be back in part 2 to explore how SIP trunking is shaping the future of communication, its impact beyond the business world, and some exciting real-world examples of how this technology is being used to connect people and businesses all over the globe. Stay tuned.
Welcome back to our discussion into SIP trunking.
In part 1, we really got into like the nuts and bolts of how this technology works, the different ways to set it up, and the amazing benefits that it offers to businesses. But like we mentioned before, SIP trunking isn't just for businesses. It's impacting how we communicate in our personal lives too.
It really is. We tend to think of SIP trunking as a business solution, but it's also quietly changing the way we communicate personally.
Okay, so give me some examples. Like, how is SIP shaping the way we connect as individuals?
Well, just think about the last time you had a video chat with family or friends who live far away. Chances are SIP was working behind the scenes, making that connection happen.
So those video calls that let us stay close with loved ones, even when we're miles apart, are powered by SIP.
Exactly. And it's not just video calls. SIP is also a big deal in online gaming.
Oh, really? I never would have guessed that.
Yeah.
How does SIP fit into the gaming world?
A lot of online games rely on real-time communication between players. Whether it's voice chat, text messaging, or even in-game events, SIP provides the infrastructure for all those interactions, making sure everything runs smoothly.
So without SIP, all those epic multiplayer battles and raids wouldn't be nearly as epic. They'd be a lot more chaotic.
Exactly. And it's not just entertainment either. SIP is making a real difference in healthcare too, through telemedicine.
Oh yeah, telemedicine. That's where I can really see the value of real-time communication.
Absolutely. Telemedicine allows patients to talk to their doctors remotely, so there's no need for travel. It makes healthcare more accessible, especially for people in rural areas or those who have trouble getting around.
So instead of going to the doctor's office, you can just have a virtual visit from home, all thanks to SIP.
Exactly.
That's incredible.
And this is just the beginning. As technology keeps advancing, we'll see even more ways to use SIP in our everyday lives.
Okay, so SIP is a big part of the future of communication, both for businesses and individuals. But what about the future of SIP itself? Are there any new trends or advancements that our listeners should know about?
That's a great question. Technology never stands still, and SIP is no exception. One of the most exciting things happening is the rise of WebRTC.
WebRTC, I've heard that term, but I'm not sure what it is exactly.
So WebRTC stands for Web Real-Time Communication. It's a technology that allows web browsers to handle real-time communication directly without needing any extra plugins or software.
I could use my web browser for video calls or online meetings instead of downloading a separate app.
Exactly. And the great thing about WebRTC is it's built on open standards, including SIP. This means we'll see even better compatibility between different communication platforms in the future.
So, with WebRTC and SIP working together, we can have a truly seamless communication experience where we can connect with anyone, anywhere, no matter what device or platform they're using.
That's the idea. And as WebRTC becomes more popular, we can expect even more innovative applications. It'll blur the lines between old and new ways of communicating, creating a more connected world.
Wow, it sounds like we're on the verge of a big change in how we communicate, and SIP is right at the center of it all.
It really is. And like with any new technology, there are always going to be challenges, things we need to figure out, but the potential is huge. I think SIP will continue to be a big part of the future of communication.
Okay, so we've talked about the exciting future of SIP and its growing impact on our lives, but let's bring this back down to earth for a second. Can you give us some real-world examples of businesses that are using SIP trunking successfully and seeing real results?
Sure, there are lots of examples, but one that comes to mind is Acme Corporation. They're a global manufacturing company with offices all over the world. By the way, we can't use their true business name without an NDA.
Okay, a global company with lots of communication needs sounds like the perfect candidate for SIP trunking. What kind of problems were they having with their old phone system?
Well, their old system was a mess. Different technologies cobbled together. It was really hard to manage and super expensive, especially for international calls. Plus, They were having trouble keeping up with the communication needs of their growing workforce.
Sounds like the classic case of growing pains and outdated technology. Yeah. So, how did SIP trunking help?
They decided to go with a cloud-based SIP trunking solution. It allowed them to simplify their communication infrastructure and streamline their operations. They were able to get rid of all those separate phone lines and expensive international calling plans, which saved them a lot of money.
So, they simplified their setup and saved money at the same time.
Right.
It's a win win.
Exactly. And that wasn't all. With their new SIP trunking system, they could easily add new lines and features as they grew. So they were always ahead of their communication needs.
So, I'm starting to see why SIP trunking is so appealing for businesses of all sizes. Any other examples you can tell us about?
Another good one is XYZ Retail. They're a chain of department stores across the country. They were having problems with call quality and reliability at their stores, which was hurting customer satisfaction and sales.
Yeah, bad call quality can really hurt a business. Yeah, especially in retail where good customer interactions are so important. So, how did site SIP trunking help them fix that?
They went with a SIP trunking solution that had something called quality of service features, which let them prioritize voice traffic over their network. So they had crystal clear call quality even during busy times.
So, they were able to give their customers a better experience by making sure every call was clear and reliable.
Absolutely.
That's a great example of how SIP trunking can directly boost a business's bottom line.
It is. And it wasn't just about customer calls. They were also able to use their SIP trunking system to connect their security cameras and alarm systems, which made their whole security setup much better.
So, they were able to bring their communication and security systems together using SIP.
Exactly.
That's really smart.
And those are just a couple of examples. There are so many businesses out there that are using SIP trunking to streamline their operations, reduce costs, improve communication, and gain a competitive edge.
It sounds like SIP trunking is a powerful tool for businesses of all sizes and industries. But before we wrap up, there's one question I think some of our listeners might have.
Okay, what is it?
We've talked a lot about how SIP trunking can save money, but are there any hidden costs or potential drawbacks that businesses should be aware of before they make the switch?
That's a great question. It's always good to be aware of the potential challenges. One thing to keep in mind is while SIP trunking itself can be very cost effective, you also need to think about the cost of your internet connection and any equipment you might need, like a PBX or IP phones, and even adding Cat 506 wiring.
So it's not just this SIP trunk itself, it's the whole infrastructure.
Right.
That makes sense.
And like we said before, having a reliable internet connection is essential for SIP trunking to work properly. So if you're having problems with your internet or you don't have enough bandwidth, you'll need to take care of that before you switch to SIP trunking.
Right, because a bad internet connection can really undermine SIP trunking. You can end up with choppy calls and frustrated customers.
Oh, exactly. Another potential challenge is learning how to set up and manage a SIP trunking system. A lot of providers have user-friendly interfaces and support resources, but you still need some technical knowledge, especially for more complicated setups.
So if a business doesn't have much IT expertise in-house, it might be better to go with a hosted VoIP solution where the provider takes care of all the technical stuff.
Exactly. Choosing the right deployment model, whether it's on-premise or hosted, is super important for a successful SIP trunking implementation. You need to think carefully about your needs, your technical capabilities, and your budget to figure out the best way to go.
So there are definitely some challenges to think about, but the benefits of SIP trunking are clear. And with good planning and the right approach, businesses can overcome those challenges and really benefit from this transformative technology.
Absolutely. As the world embraces digital transformation, technologies like SIP trunking will become essential for businesses to succeed.
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground in part two. We've seen how SIP is impacting our lives outside of work, explored the future of SIP with new technologies like WebRTC, and looked at some real world examples of businesses successfully using SIP trunking.
We've also talked about some of the potential downsides and stressed the importance of planning carefully and choosing the right approach for your specific needs.
In part three, we'll wrap up our deep dive by talking about some key takeaways and leaving you with some final thoughts as you explore the world of communication technology. Stay tuned.
Cool. I needed a coffee break.
Welcome back to our final part of this deep dive into SIP trunking. We've talked about a lot, from the technical details to real-world uses, and even what the future holds for this technology. I've got to say, I'm pretty impressed by everything SIP trunking can do.
Yeah, it's been quite a journey, but I think we've got a good understanding now of why SIP trunking is changing the world of communication.
Yeah, for sure. But before we finish up, I'll make sure everyone listening walks away with a key takeaway. So, if you had to boil everything down, what are the most important things to remember about SIP trunking?
I think the main thing is SIP trunking is more than just a technical term. It's a whole new way of thinking about communication for businesses and for us in our personal lives.
Right. It's not just about replacing old phone lines with virtual ones. It's a whole new way of connecting.
Exactly. And with this new way of connecting come a lot of benefits, like saving money, having more flexibility and scalability, and making sure your business can keep communicating no matter what.
Well, we've seen how businesses can really improve by using SIP trunking. They can streamline their operations, improve communication, and even get a leg up on the competition.
And for individuals, SIP is behind those video calls that keep us connected. It powers online gaming, and it's even changing healthcare through telemedicine. So with all of this put together,
It's wild to think about how one technology is quietly influencing so much of our lives.
it really is. But just like with any powerful tool, we have to use it the right way. Choosing a good provider, having a strong internet connection, and planning carefully are all crucial for success.
That's a good point. It's not like you just switched SIP trunking and all your communication problems are magically solved.
Right.
You need to put some thought and planning into it.
Absolutely. But if you do it right, the payoff can be huge. And as the world moves more and more towards internet communication, understanding SIP trunking is a big advantage. And
It's like having a cheat sheet for the digital age.
I like that. It's about having the knowledge to understand what's happening and make good decisions about your communication needs.
Well, I think we've given our listeners a lot to think about, but before we go, is there anything else you'd like to share? Any final thoughts for our listeners as they navigate the world of communication technology?
I'd say don't be afraid of change. The way we communicate is constantly changing, and it can be a lot to keep up with, but it's also really exciting. There are always new things to learn and new possibilities to explore.
So stay curious, stay informed, and don't be afraid to jump into the deep end of technology. You never know what you might discover.
That's great advice. It's been great talking with you about SIP trunking.
Likewise. And to all our listeners out there, thanks for joining us on this journey. We hope you learned something new and maybe even found a new appreciation for the tech that connects us all. Until next time, keep exploring, learning, and keep those conversations going.